Recently I met up with some old friends and our conversations led us to Pony Club. These were friends that I'd met in Pony Club. Now, just as many professional horse people started competing in Pony Club, so did I. And just as many professionals fondly remember the time they spent with their friends and their horses, I too have many happy memories of Pony Club. But more than that, I now look back on life lessons that can be learned, certainly learned by me, but can be learned at an institution like Pony Club. The first one is to look after others first. So I rode over 10 kilometres to Pony Club, and we often had an all-day muster. And you can imagine in the summer, in the Queensland sun, by the time we were at lunchtime, we were all looking forward to a cold drink. So the canteen's open, but before anyone was allowed into the canteen, the chief instructor had to give the go-ahead. He checked that all the horses had a drink, they were all comfortable, long before we were able to look after ourselves. The lesson here is to make sure you look after others first, particularly if they can't look after themselves. We can talk about sick or vulnerable, but sometimes the lessons are around us. So just as we feed our horses before we feed ourselves, we often find ourselves in situation with those less fortunate. We can take a minute or two of our time to assist them to do something they can't do for themselves. It could be something very simple, like someone's got their hands full. They need the door open, so open the door for someone who's got their hands full. Someone who might be short or just can't quite get up to a high shelf. If you're there, you can help them, just something that they can't reach for themselves, or even just something simple, like you're in a lot of traffic and you can give way to another driver. Those things are all going back to look after others first. The next lesson is just be consistent, right? So I loved Pony Club. I loved going to Pony Club, riding with my friends, doing horse stuff all day and learning more about horses was just my ultimate dream life. But I wasn't a good rider. I had a 13-2 hand-high pony who was very slow. He didn't see the need to jump over anything if he could go around and just push through it. And he wasn't a particularly good show pony or any sort of good type. And there were other riders at Pony Club who'd been in Pony Club for years. They'd mastered the art of jumping and went to other Pony Club events. They always seemed to pick up the ribbons and the trophies. But I loved my pony. I was happy just going to Pony Club. Anyway, at our break-up on the first year, there was a table of trophies to hand it out, and I expected to see some of my friends who were much better riders than me pick up these trophies. But then I was in for a surprise. We had attendance trophy. So in my first year in Pony Club, even as a newcomer on a very uncompetitive pony, I picked up a trophy and was very proud. I think the lesson here is that even if you feel you're not progressing at a skill and everyone else is doing better than you are, just be persistent, continue to learn and enjoy it. It may not be obvious to you, but just by being persistent and continuing to learn, you're making progress. The third lesson is about confidence building exercise. So lots of people think that I'm an extrovert, but I'm far from it, and I was far from it. I was that little girl having an anxiety attack, barely able to breathe and hiding behind my mother's skirt. I can remember this happening again and again. But in those days, everyone just called me shy. I can also remember being questioned, even at school about things I knew the answer to, and I had the answer going round and round in my head, but I just couldn't answer. I just couldn't bring myself to answer because I was shy. The truth is, I couldn't speak because of the anxiety, and I just didn't have any confidence to do it. So part of my journey to become more confident was at Pony Club. The first part of the morning was troop drill. We had to number off. I'm sure you would have done it or seen it. You look at a person on one side where the number's coming from. When they say the number, you turn your head and you say your number loudly to the person the other side. It has to be loudly. If the instructor didn't hear it, then we did it all over again, simply projecting one number to another person to hear it in an outdoor setting has an amazing confidence building effect. It had to be precise, it had to be projected out loud enough so someone could hear it. We did lots of other exercises as well. The one you say down, down, down as the outside front leg touches the ground when you're learning diagonals. Even doing things like counting the number of trot steps between poles and then canter strides between jumps. All of it was out loud in an outdoor setting so that people at a distance could hear. You had to project your voice. Now, as an instructor, I like to insist that people can show me they can recognise things like trot diagonals and canter stride by counting out loud. And I do find that if they're focused on counting out loud, keeping the rhythm, counting the number of strides, saying now, 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 as the outside front leg touches the ground, I do find this teaching technique improves confidence. Another lesson learned at Pony Club is about attracting attention, and sometimes it can be good to attract attention. So our Pony Club uniform was an orange shirt with a sky blue tie. So not only was it very, very bright, the orange and the blue clashed. Now I was an introvert, but was at Pony Club. It wasn't so bad because everyone else was wearing the same colour as me. But when I was wearing my uniform, if I was on my way home, I didn't want to stop at a shop and get a drink on the way home because I felt everyone would be looking at me, and some might even ask questions about the badly clashing coloured uniform I was wearing. Now, one of the instructors tried to get the uniform changed to a white shirt, which was most of the other clubs in the zone had white shirts, so white shirt, blue tie. At every meeting, she'd put it on the agenda, change the uniform. And every meeting, it was like, oh yeah, that's outvoted again. And then I came along and I voted with her, and apparently we almost succeeded in having the uniform changed. But the next time we were at a competition, the president of the club made a very valid point to me. As we were getting ready for the day, he pulled me aside and asked me to spot where our other members were. Amongst the crowd of almost 1,000 riders, they were easily spotted. I could just pick them out one by one. They could easily be spotted because of the orange shirts. But then he said, now can you see why I don't want to change uniforms? Valid point, I think. Later that year, we entered into the Pony Club team of 4 at Brisbane Royal Show. Our club had never entered such a prestigious competition, but the 4 of us all made sure we had brand new orange shirts for the event. Before we even had mounted, we attracted attention. The bright orange shirts were easily spotted, and they were spotted by a photographer within the Australian-wide Hoofs and Horns magazine. We won the competition and received for our efforts a full colour photo in Hoofs and Horns that much. This may not have happened if we didn't have our eye-catching combination of colours for our uniform. The bright orange shirts certainly stood out. As I progressed through Pony Club, I just think I even before that, I didn't start riding when I was young, but I loved to learn and read about horses from as early as I can remember. We had the opportunity to be assessed for our proficiency certificates, and I jumped at the chance. Some of the better riders had a bit of a whinge saying they came to ride and not to do schoolwork. But this wasn't schoolwork for me. This was learning more about horses, which is what I did when I wasn't riding anyway. Our chief instructor recommended a couple of books to help us prepare for the Pony Club certificates, and I ordered all of them, even the ones that were for higher certificates than what I was going for. I read them again and again and again. When I went through the syllabus for certificates, there was something I couldn't find out. I had to know about founder. So we didn't have the internet or Google back in those days, so I did it the old-fashioned way and went to the local library. I searched and searched. There was about half a dozen books on horse health at our local library, or had anything at all to do with horse health. Couldn't find anything there, so I went to a neighbouring library, searched and searched, still couldn't find anything. Then I ended up catching a bus, which was a bit of an expedition, went into Brisbane City Library for the day. Didn't have any luck there after spending the day in the library. There was nothing about founder in any of the horse books. There was information about laminitis, but I'd taken notes about that, but nothing about founder. So even though my shyness prevented me from networking as much, this was more important, and I knew I needed to find the confidence to ask a few people about this founder. I was introduced to a bushy, which is like an Australian bushman who'd worked with horses all over Australia. And when he saw my notes, he laughed. He said, "Founder's just Australian for laminitis." Oh, okay. So even though research is done since then, and some people might say there's a difference between founder and laminitis, at that stage that's all I needed to know. It was very closely related to laminitis. So I was relieved to find this out and went to Pony Club, ready for my certificate day. After my first pony, this is another lesson, after my first pony, my next horse was much more high-strung. Some, and certainly me, I'd probably say it's a bit too much for me. He was a bit nappy, so every time he didn't want to do something, he would just head in the direction that he wanted to go and would do a little rear or a spin around or something every time I tried to change direction. Anyway, I didn't want to have arguments with him. I just wanted to love my horse and have fun. So I just would pat him, and basically it made him worse. My first competition with him was a 6-bar event. So in this event, there's 6 jumps all in a row at an equal distance, with each jump higher than the previous one. Now, even though my new horse was nappy, he was an experienced jumper. So I was looking forward to this event. In the practice arena, he went over a jump. Then, of course, he, being nappy, he headed for the gate. Well, each time he did this, we went over the jump, headed for the gate. I stopped him. I was able to do that. Then I led him back to the other side of the jump, got on, and went over it again. And then he headed for the gate again. I'm sure it would have been quite, obvious to someone who was watching that this was a pretty nappy horse. Anyway, when we did the competition, I saluted the judge, and you know how you're supposed to circle, warm up, just get your horse going, get your canter established. I saluted the judge without circle, warm up, anything else. Went straight through the start flags, over the jump, and through the finish pegs. I didn't worry that he bolted all the way back to the horse float. This was the highest that I'd ever jumped in my life, so I was elated. I loved jumping and I loved my new horse. All I had to do was keep him in the middle of the jumps, lean forward, hold his mane so I didn't get left behind. Anyway, so I got off the horse after he bolted all the way back to the float, but then someone was calling my name. We were clear and we had to go into the next round. I jumped on, he reared, spun around, he wasn't going anywhere. So I led him back, mounted, saluted the judge, and did the same thing again through the start pegs, keeping him in the centre, just going over the 6 jumps, leaning forward, grabbing the mane, highest I'd ever jumped in my life. And then he bolted back to the horse float, except the jumps were higher. So everything was the same, jumps were higher. Well, we had another 2 clear rounds, exactly the same. Jumps higher, all I had to do was keep him in the middle and just hold the mane. Anyway, I won my first blue ribbon, but my horse was out of control. So our next competition included a walk-trot race around a race course where the event was held. My new horse was a decent walker and could cover a lot of ground in trot. I wondered if I could get another ribbon, even a blue one. We started off, but a couple of other horses were ahead of us. It was a fairly big class, this one. But in the trot, there was 2 horses ahead of us. So I thought even if we didn't win, we'd still come in third. And as we headed into the straight, he headed off to the right to an open gate and that headed back to the stables. Straight out of the competition. I was so mad, I turned him and I kicked him, and he stopped rearing and then trotted ahead to finish the race. Almost surprised myself. So even though we didn't win the race and didn't even get a ribbon, I was the winner on that day. I realised that all the patting and kindness wasn't going to help any sort of partnership with my new horse, and that there are times in a horse's training that I needed to be assertive. I didn't learn that I had to be assertive when I was mad at the horse, but later I learned that you can be assertive while staying cool, and I think this is an essential lesson in training. Now the last life lesson that I wanted to learn about, that I wanted to talk about today, was about volunteering. So when I was in Pony Club, when I turned 17, I was an associate, so the oldest age group, but often this group was smaller. As a result, we finished our events early. Sometimes we'd be finished before lunch, but the younger kids would still be doing their events. So rather than just hang around for the rest of the day, I found myself at the jumping arena. The first time I asked, someone asked me to just step in for a few minutes and just pencil for a round or two while the penciler was busy. I just found myself hooked. I found myself volunteering in the jumping arena as much as I could. Every time we were finished our events, I'd want to go to the jumping arena. I'd be there before the other events, started to help set the jumps up. If I was in the general area, I'd just be there and ready to pick up a rail, but the best bit was penciling for the judge. So penciling's writing down the scores, as the judge calls them, when the rider and the horse are doing their competition jumping round. The judges were very helpful and loved to answer my many questions. I asked them about the rules, the variations of the rules, even some rules that weren't written down. They taught me how to score at some of the trickier events, and there was another penciler handy. They allowed me to co-judge to test my skills. I learned how to do the placings of the event in a very quick time, and at times, even before the last horse had completed their round, I already knew what the placings were. Long before I was being asked to judge or asked to pencil at large competitions, championships and agriculture shows, and then to judge. So, one sort of led to the other. They tend to snowball a bit. But the best event I penciled at was Brisbane Royal, where I was an official steward. I was the second female to be honoured that position, and I look back over the 10 days of Brisbane Royal very favourably, and knowing that this could only have happened because of all the volunteer I had done at Pony Club. So there's some important life lessons that I've learned in Pony Club. Certainly I've had, look back again at very fond memories. I would certainly recommend, if anyone has the opportunity to join Pony Club, to join it, but not just to do that. You don't have to be a rider. You can just go as a volunteer and learn. I can remember when we were at Pony Club, there was an older couple whose children had ridden, and they stayed on, and they were president and secretary for years, and then they ran the canteen. So they continued with their Pony Club experiences long after their kids had finished riding. And I think this is just a really good place to spend your time.